Okay, hello everyone. It's good to have you all with us today. Today we're going to be discussing in this webinar what is new in SOLIDWORKS 2020, specifically with regards to our parts and our assemblies. So today we actually have two presenters. We have myself, and I will show myself here. So this is me. My name is Colin Murphy. I've been with Javelin for over 3 years now. I have some mechanical design experience of custom welding equipment, but now my life is all SOLIDWORKS. So it's been fun the last couple of weeks diving into 2020 and really seeing what it can do. And with me is...
I'm Claudia Mak and joined the Javelin team this year. I've got some automotive manufacturing experience primarily, and it's been great.
Okay, so we will dive right in. We got lots of fun stuff to show you today. We're going to kind of break that into 3 parts, not all of equal length, but we're going to touch briefly on sketching, and then we're going to get into our parts, and then finally Claudia is going to take you all through the enhancements that we see in 2020 with regards to our assemblies. So starting with myself, we are going to talk about sketching firstly. And we have some nice enhancements with sketching, a lot of enhancements the past couple of years, specifically regarding sketch functionality on touch-enabled devices. So more and more of our users are using Windows 10 touch-enabled devices, and with that, comes the desire to actually be able to model and manipulate and edit our SOLIDWORKS parts and our sketches specifically. So we'll go through the enhancements there in 2020 with that. As well, we have some enhancements for our undo and redo functionality. If we do accidentally undo ourselves out of a sketch, potentially, we don't necessarily lose all of that work. And then we'll take a look at some continuity options that we have now in 2020 with regards to our sketching as well. So we'll dive in and first take a look at our sketch enhancements. So like I said, some new touchscreen sketch enhancements were introduced. So we can draw our slots if we want to. We can also apply dimensions to these slots very quickly. And now in 2020, we can enter dimensions without the use of a keyboard. We just touch the dimension and then enter the appropriate dimension into our dialog box just that easily. So we don't actually need to have a physical keyboard because we won't always have one with our touch devices. A customizable shortcut toolbar is still going to exist, which is going to allow us to complete different operations inside of our sketch environment, like converting this bottom edge, for instance. We just select the edge and hit convert. To make changes to this in 2020, we have a new power modify tool. So what this allows us to do is we can modify our sketches using gestures instead of just picking individual tools. For instance, you saw there a curved stroke is going to make a fillet, a straight one is going to create a chamfer for us. If we do an X, it's going to actually split entities. We can extend lines like you see there just by drawing an extend or an extension of our lines. And if we want to delete anything, we can just kind of start with a squiggle and then extrude it or sketch it out through our line. If we do a double stroke through an entity, it's going to offset it. And what you just saw there is a double parallel stroke that actually offsetted all of our contour when we complete that double stroke within the contour itself. So I know more and more people are starting to use this touchscreen functionality for their sketching, and it's getting easier and easier now in SOLIDWORKS 2020. So now we're going to dive into SOLIDWORKS, and I'm going to show, let's just move this panel if we can. There we go, move it off. I'm going to discuss the other enhancements that we have with regards to sketching. So I'm just going to open up this part. All right, and inside of our sketch here, well, actually, let me turn on our zebra stripes first. So zebra stripes are good for seeing continuity. And we can see that at this edge, even though it looks smooth, we actually have a break in continuity. So if we want this to be a smoother transition from this section up to this one, we can change that now and get really nice continuity in 2020. So I'm going to edit this sketch. And if we see here, these are our curvature cones. So they're showing us the curvature, and you can see here that it's actually breaking at the end of this spline before it starts into this, this arc. So in order to change that, what I can do is just select the endpoint, excuse me, the intersection point here, and change it maybe to make it tangent. We can see those curvature cones update. Or I can go to make equal curvature, but we can still see that there's a break there in the middle. In 2020, we now add in G3 torsion continuity in order to really smooth out this transition between the two. Now, if I continue on here and I undo, I can undo these changes, undo, undo, and if I hit it one too many times, we might undo ourselves out of the sketch. Now, in 2019, we would have kind of lost all of our all of the work that we did in the sketch there because we hit undo one too many times. We now have the option to redo and actually go back into that sketch really easily. So here I can redo once. Let's move to where I can see this and redo it back to where we actually were. So you'll exit out of this sketch. And now we can see that we have a nice continuous curvature between those two entities. So again, some nice enhancements there with sketching, particularly if we are completing sketching on a touch-enabled Windows device. So we're going to move forward now. That sketching is probably going to be the shortest section of this presentation, but we're going to move now into our parts environment and enhancements that we would see with our parts. So a lot of enhancements here that I'm really excited about for parts. This one is probably the one that gave me the biggest wow moment, and it's going to allow us to actually repair missing fillet references if those edges are still there. And I'll show you a situation where we might actually notice this error coming up. So let's dive back into SOLIDWORKS, and I'm going to open up this component here. More specifically, I'm going to open up this one in the middle. So let's let this assembly load. Select this component, and we're going to open it. Now here we have different features. We have one that represents a boss extrude that is actually cutting out all of this contour. So it's cutting out these pockets as well as the perimeter. And we may want to change that. So potentially I'm going to edit this feature to not select the whole contour, but to select the outside. And then I'm going to create another feature that uses this sketch in order to actually cut this through. Let's just make sure we're showing our sketch. And I'm going to use this to cut here. Now there's different reasons why we might do this, make this change. In this case, probably the best reason that I can really think of is that we just want a little bit more control downstream of how we're actually cutting these features out. But I'm going to cut it through like that. So we have the same geometry, but we've created it in a different way. Now our holes should go okay, but unfortunately, this is where we get an error in our fillet. And the reason here is because we've changed the references to all of these edges compared to what they were before. So in the past, in 2019, we would have to actually delete this fillet and then recreate it. What I can do now is if I edit that feature, you'll see we have all of these missing edges. What I'm going to do is just right-click and repair all missing references. So it's going to pick up that there are edges located in the same place, and it's actually going to go through and repair all of those edges for me, and then I can confirm, and those edges have been fixed. That one blew my mind when I saw it for the first time. I was very, very, very excited about that one. Right, so that's really going to save us a lot of time, right? If we do need to make those design changes, instead of having to remake all of those fillets and reselect all of those edges, if the geometry is in the same place, it's just going to repair those missing references for us automatically. And now we'll move on to surfacing. So you know, I've worked with a lot of Javelin customers who are very reliant on the surfacing tools inside of SOLIDWORKS. And one problem that they have sometimes is that when they go to offset a surface, they get an error saying that it can't offset. And that is sometimes, depending on the complexity of the part, really tough to troubleshoot. So what we'll see in 2020 is the ability to, here it is, to isolate and actually see what faces are causing us problems when we're trying to offset. So if I select this surface and I go to offset, maybe we go 5 millimeters, hit OK, we get an error. But what's going to happen now is it's actually going to identify specific faces that are not able to offset. In this case, it's probably these little fillets, and we can see, yep, that's what it is. But we have specific failing faces that couldn't offset successfully. So this didn't prevent us from offsetting the rest of the faces. It just prevented us from offsetting those faces that are actually going to fail. So what I can do is I can right click and remove all failing faces and then complete my offset. Now I'm just going to go in and hide our initial surface, and just using some standard surfacing tools, we can trim these back against each other. Select just these two. Hit OK, and there's our one nice merged surface. Now we have the ability to actually go in and maybe add a fillet on this face. Just by selecting the face, that'll grab all of our edges, and our offset is complete. So no more are we going through trying to troubleshoot specifically which maybe little face here or there is preventing us from offsetting. It's still going to complete all the surfaces that offset successfully. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to thicken this part. So I'll just use my command search, grab our thicken tool. So now we have the option to thicken in both directions symmetrically about our surface. We can also specify a thicken direction if we want to, instead of just going normal. So if I wanted to thicken in a specific vector, then I can do that too. But just selecting that, maybe we go a little smaller for a thicken. I hit confirm. We've thickened equally 1.25 millimeters in this case out in both directions from our surface once it calculates. And there we go. Now we have a nice solid body from our surface. So really, again, that's another way that we can take those complex surfaces. In this case, it's relatively easy to find where those failing faces are, even without this functionality. But on more complicated faces or surfaces that we're trying to offset, it might be, significantly more difficult for us to find that geometry that's causing us problems. Where now SOLIDWORKS will find that automatically. We'll move into one last section for myself, and then I will pass things over to Claudia to talk about assemblies. But I'm going to talk about structure system. So structure system was a big enhancement in 2019 that allowed us to create complex welded structures like the one you see on your screen, significantly faster than we could with weldments. We also had less reliance on our like 3D and 2D sketches, for instance, because we could use sketch planes, we could use line, or we could use edges as well to define our profile geometry. Now here, this is actually all that I'm going to make, or I'm going to use to create that system that we saw before. So I'm going to enter into my structure system. It is a completely different environment than our weldment environment, but the output will essentially be the same, where we have a multi-body part and a cut list. Inside of my structure system, first I'm going to add in primary members. And I can connect between points now in 2020. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to link together and say, I want to go between this point and up to here, and it's going to create those members for us. So we actually don't need any sketch segments anymore. We can just connect from point to point. We can also use a point to define an endpoint, so like a common endpoint in this case. So if I extend between these two points, I can go up to, if I click on it properly, this third point here. Or we can just specify from these points, I just want to go up to a plane. Say from these points, I just want to extend all the way up to this plane. And it's going to complete that for me. I can also specify a vector. So maybe I want to go in this direction for some reason. I can go over there up to that plane still. I'm going to keep it vertical. That looks a little bit better. Okay, I'll make sure I'm using the right profile. There. And then I can confirm. So those are primary members. Running between primary members, we're going to have secondary members. So in this case, I'm going to select my two beams to connect between, and then I can select planes for all of my intermediary beams to lie. So I'm going to change the profile here. I will go to this one. And I'm also going to change the pierce point. So this is similar to weldments, how we would change our intersection point through our profile. We can do the same thing here. Select that. Whoops, we'll flip back around. And now I'm going to add in one more secondary member. And in this case, we're going to go between different points on these members. So if I select one here and one here, I can actually specify the offset from either end. In this case, maybe I want 0 and 0. So we run between the corners. And we also have the new option in 2020 to split this member automatically. So we don't need to trim this afterwards. I can select these two bodies in between, and it's going to actually split this angled one according to where those lie. If I go into my profile, I'm just going to rotate this one 90 degrees and then hit confirm. When I exit the structure system, just like in 2019, we're going to be prompted with our corner management. And this allows me to specify that I want my beam to go right up to the other body. And I can do that in my two member corners as well. When I hit confirm, it's created this option. And if I hide this, you can see that it's actually really nicely trimmed all of these bodies back to each other automatically. And then we get a cut list just like we would with traditional weldments. Another new enhancement to structure system in 2020 is the ability to create a circular pattern. So if I specify a circular reference, in the past, we would have to do this using bodies. Now we can pattern the structure system itself. And this is really important because this is actually going to maintain the intelligence of the structure system across the pattern and allow us to pattern a new structure system between each of these individual structure systems. To show you what I mean, very quickly, we will go into a structure system, which is going to create a new one. And I'm going to make a secondary member. It's going to connect, it's going to lie in planes, and it'll connect to these two and these two. And the planes it will lie in are this one, this one, this one, and this one. So you can see we can actually connect automatically between those patterned structure system. I also want to align my plane here. Go. And again, in the same way, when we exit our structure system command, we're now going to get our corner management, but our corner management is going to be going between these new beams and the beams that we created earlier. So I can specify the same corner treatments that I would like, hit go, and it's going to trim all of that information back very nicely. And then to complete this, all I'm going to do is another circular pattern around the center axis and grab my new structure system and pattern it too. And very quickly, we're able to create a very complicated welded assembly with a complete cut list of 204 bodies in just a couple of minutes. So no reliance on weldment groups, no reliance on sketch segments here. We just use points and planes in order to define all of our weldment geometry. So again, more improvements to this tool. It was new in 2019. So, a lot of feedback came in from the SOLIDWORKS community about what they wanted to see inside of this tool. And there were some really nice enhancements to it in 2020. And that brings us into our final section, which is going to have to do with assemblies. And for that, I'm going to pass things off to Claudia.
Hi everyone. So we're going to take a look at assembly mates first. And the quick mate toolbar, as you know, came in 2014. And we've added some more mate types to the quick mate toolbar. So that includes limit mates, slot mates, with position constraints, width mates. And we also get the flip alignment pop-up button, which comes up automatically. All right. So we're going to open up this mounting bracket here, and I have some components here that I'd like to constrain. So hop in, and I have this washer here that I'd like to mate with this slot. And as I said before, we've now got the slot mate here in our quick alignment toolbar, quick mates toolbar, and we can define how we'd like to have it mated with the slot. So we can center it, and then we're going to add this bolt here, and I'm going to use a profile center mate. And then we can see that the bolt is not exactly in the orientation that I would like, so I can have the flip mate alignment there, and now it looks good. Now I'm going to use a width mate to mate this dowel here. And currently it's upside down. Also, I want it to be centered. We have some options here. And once I'm happy with that, I can flip the alignment on this so it's oriented correctly. Now I'm going to finish this off with having this made concentrically with the hole. And I can also edit the mate here so that I can flip the mate alignment as well on my right click toolbar. Now finally, I want to make this hinge flexible so I can see how this assembly looks like when this is open. And we can add distance mates and angle mates to our assembly. So I'm just going to have this hinge go from 0 to 90 degrees. And there we go. You can see that it moves as we intend. All right, so we saw that we have much more options in our quick mates toolbar. So it allows us to work very quickly to constrain our components in our assemblies. Now onto assembly patterns. So for the assembly pattern enhancements, we now have derived orientations for our pattern-driven patterns. We can also vary specific components in our linear and circular patterns. We can also have more options for mirroring. So if we have non-symmetric parts, we can mirror by origin to get more control and get the proper mirroring that we are looking for. So let's take a look. So here we have a carriage assembly, and while we wait for that to load, all right, so I'm going to open up this assembly here. This sub-assembly, and I've got some bolts here that I would like to pattern into these holes that I created. So I'm going to go create a pattern-driven component pattern. And I want to pattern this bolt. And my driving feature are these holes. And we can see here it's a little bit off, but I can select the seed position here to be this first one, and now we see that's oriented correctly. And if I wanted to, I could align to seed, but in this case, I want to align to the holes. And I'm happy with that. And we will go back to our assembly. Now, next I want to go modify our end caps here. And here we've got some bolts here in this, and we've got some holes as well. So I'm going to use a circular component pattern, and I'm going to select the screw as the component. And I have 8 of these. And I need to select a direction as well, so I have this axis. Now we notice that these holes are not all equally spaced. So we have modified instances, and I can select these instances that I'd like to modify. And this one as well. So they're aligned into those holes. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go back to my assembly. And there we go. And now I want to have another end cap assembly on the other half of my carriage assembly. So I will select these planes, mirror the components here. And we have a few options for mirroring. So we notice here that it's off center by doing center of bounding box due to the part being non-symmetric. But we have a few other options here like center of mass, which does a better job, and component origin, which centers that perfectly so that those holes align with the bolt holes. We also have some other options for the orientation as such. But in this case, I want it to be like this. And now I'm happy with that. And there we go. Now this assembly is complete. All right, so with this, being able to vary those linear and circular patterns means we don't have to create patterns specifically for those instances that are not, that need to be modified, and we have more control over our mirroring. Now onto envelopes. Envelopes have been around, assembly envelopes have been around since 2013, and it allows us to basically work on, they've been a great tool for referencing components that don't affect calculations or bombs and being able to do those top level designs from using those envelopes. Now in 2020, we now have the capability of having envelopes that are no longer limited to components in the same assembly. So now we can simply select components needed for reference and a destination assembly. So in this case, we're picking that, that mount, and then we're going to send this to our scissor plumbing assembly. And so it's become an envelope in that assembly. And then from there, we can go and open up that plumbing assembly. And there we see that we have our envelope there, and we can use it to mate our envelope, our plumbing so that we can position it as we would like in the top level assembly. So there we go, we add a profile center mate, and now when we go back to our main assembly, this will be positioned correctly. So it allows us to make those, to work seamlessly between teams, and making sure that those sub-assemblies fit properly in our top level assemblies. Now, our next part is about flexible components, and flexible components are great for, you know, if you're showing, rather than showing various different configurations for parts like springs or bellows or hinges. Now, flexible components allow us to show those on the fly, like in your assemblies, and it allows us to have multiple instances and support it in our BOMs, and it supports mass properties and custom properties as well. So let's take a look. So here we have a flexible assembly, and it moves about this axis here. And we see that we have some bellows here, and we can go ahead and make these flexible. So this is over here, make part flexible, and I'll be referencing this pivot ball housing here. And once I do that, we see that the bellows are going to move to be fixed to that face. So as I move this around, we'll see that those bellows will move accordingly, which is really cool. And we're going to go ahead and do the other side. And now these all move together. And so these automatically update as I move the assembly. And so this is great for hinges as well, springs, all sorts of parts, so that you don't have to create other instances of this bellows part to show different configurations of this part, of this assembly. So there we go. And finally, we have some enhancements to 3D Interconnect. As we know, in 2019, we added more file types to 3D Interconnect, but now in SOLIDWORKS 2020, now we can simply drag and drop those into SOLIDWORKS rather than having to go into Insert Component and add those in. Also, we have some new file formats, including 3D DWGs and DXS, as well as IFC. So that will allow us to work with more file types without the need for translation. So to take a look at this, we're going to be working with a step file. I'll be dragging in to our assembly. I hit a couple too many there. All right, so here I just have in Windows Explorer a step file here, and I'm just going to drag that in. And there we go, 3D Interconnect is reading that file, bringing it in, and now I can go and make that. With our profile center mate. And there we go. Now I fixed that into my assembly, and I'm pretty happy with that. So it allows us to work with supplier parts or customer parts a lot quicker. Than before. So it's easier to collaborate and work together. All right, so that was it for assembly enhancements in SOLIDWORKS 2020. And did anyone have any questions out there in the audience?
Yeah, if you do have any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat box. We're always available here at Javelin to answer any questions that you do have. So, do reach out to our tech support if you do have any questions. But thank you all so much for joining us today. We're very excited about 2020, and we're really excited to see what everyone will be doing with all the great new functionality. So, thanks so much for joining.